I understand rejection because I've experienced it in multiple ways, multiple times. I was getting to the end of this. I lost count how many times. I mean, it was so many interviews I had lost count, but I remember towards the end of that, I had emailed the person who was the head of the search committee and I said, you know what? No, thank you. I am a candidate who possesses a lot of valuable assets and skills that could
Yeah.
really bring a lot to any organization. And
Yeah.
I do not understand this
Wow.
line of interviewing. I hope you all find the candidate that you're looking for, but I am going to continue my search elsewhere because basically I was communicating this makes no sense. If you have to wait all day to make your mind up on me, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to make my mind up on myself. I'm going to remind myself of my worth, of what I possess, how I can upgrade any environment, any team, any organization. And this is not arrogance, this is confidence.
Dr. Juanita Tooks, you are the Assistant Director of Counseling and Psychological Services at the University of Michigan Flint. What influenced that career choice?
It's interesting because when I was in my PhD program, I knew that I wanted to kind of pivot from being in mental health. I was working in community mental health when I went into my PhD program. So I was working for child and family service organizations, nonprofits, community centers, like things like that. And I knew that I wanted to be in higher education. So I'm like, I'm going to teach. I am going to be a full time faculty member. That is what I'm going to do. Um, but around my third year, I took an unexpected pivot as far as my career path. And I did not know. I mean, of course, it was unexpected, so I would have known. But I saw a huge gap between the academic support that doc students just wasn't receiving. I didn't understand why there was not more academic support. It almost felt like I know from my experience and for other peers of mine at that time, it's like we're just figuring it out by ourselves. And a PhD is hard. And when you are trying to figure it out by yourself, it makes it 10 times harder. So I'm like, what can I do about this? And so I took a pivot and said, you know what? I don't think I want to be a faculty. I think I want to go into higher education and provide something to doctoral students in particular that I wasn't receiving, and that was academic support. So I pivoted and said I want to work in higher education. But then the next question was, I have a clinical mental health background. How am I going to break into higher education? Because I also knew at that time that I didn't want to just be a college counselor. I didn't want to be a professor. I did not want to be a college counselor. So I'm like, well, how am I supposed to learn about higher education and get that hands-on experience if I'm not in those roles? And so that's when I thought about advising. And I'm like, and I was inspired by that because advising is a service I didn't really utilize as a college student. Not in undergrad. I picked my classes with an advisor, but that was it. I didn't have any guidance, didn't look for help. And I think it was because really wasn't promoted to me. Hey, have you talked to an advisor? I never really remember my professors ever mentioning advising.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't. So I'm like, I don't know what that experience really is. In my master's program, I didn't do it either. In my doctorate program, you were assigned an advisor. So I had one, but I still wasn't getting that support that I wanted. And it was a partial reason why that experience was hard. So I'm like, let me go talk to some people who work in advising and just see what that's all about. So I had a good friend who knew someone who was an advisor, and she connected me with him. He talked to me, about the role, about the pay, about what to expect. I talked to two advisors just to get some more information, did some research online. And the question that I was asked was, why do you want to be an advisor? You are about to become a doctor. Why do you want to become an advisor? And I said, I want to get the experience. I really want to understand what the experience is, and I want to shift how support is given to doctoral students. So once I started doing that, I applied for a position at Michigan State University's College of Osteopathic Medicine as an academic advisor. I got hired for that position and did that for almost 3 years. And it was great. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. I specifically wanted to work with doc students. I didn't care what the doctorate was in. It didn't matter to me. It could have been music, engineering, medicine, didn't make a difference. If you were a doc student, I wanted to support you academically. And in that role, I was able to do that while at the same time learning about higher education administration, learning about how we recreate curriculums, how we establish policies, how do we address campus-wide issues, individual student issues, student conduct. It felt like a crash course because there is so much in higher ed. Like there is so much in higher ed. But I appreciate the experience because it gave me exactly what I needed. I knew that advising was not going to be the last stop as far as my career path, but it was such an important place that I needed to be in for a season. And so while I was doing advising, I said, I still want to make change. Like I still want to make change, but I want to do it as a leader. I want to do it as a leader. I'm very limited in what I can do in my advising role. And even though I love it very much, I still see ways where I want to support students, but I don't have the power. I don't have the say to get these things rolling or get these things approved or jumpstart these things. So that's when I prayed about it. I sought advice from my mentors, did some research on LinkedIn, talked to some people, and I said, I think it's time for me to pursue a leadership position. And so I saw, and that road was pretty complicated. Like it was pretty hard. I went through a lot of interviews for certain positions. And when I gave up the search, there was a position that I saw on Indeed. My cousin, thank God for him, he was like, don't give up now, keep looking.
Yeah.
And with my last piece of energy, I did a search on Indeed and found the position for the assistant director position that I now hold at the University of Michigan Flint. And being in this role has allowed me to, again, do exactly what I wanted. I'm able to be creative in my role. I'm able to create policies. I'm able to have a say with weight, to whereas I can approve things, I can create things, I can start things, I can say no, to things that I think would not be effective or helpful for students. So that it started off with me saying I'm going to be a professor. And then it switched to me being an assistant director in a counseling center. Now, mind you, I said I didn't want to be a college counselor at first. So it just lets you know this is not a linear process. You might have certain things that you're looking at and passionate about in one season. And then in another season, you're looking at your path at a completely different vantage point. And so that's what's kind of happened with me. And that's what led me here today.
Yeah, no, there's just so many things I want to follow up on. But before we do that, let's step back and talk a little bit about your earlier days. What was your college major? I know you have a master's degree as well. And then you went to work, it looks like in mental health services with different organizations. But let's go back and backtrack to your educational background.
Okay, so I completed my undergrad at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. My undergrad degree is in psychology. And then I took 2 years off because after that, it took me 5 years to complete that degree. After that, I'm like, my brain is barely here. Like, I need a break. And so I went to go pursue some other passions outside of academics. At the time, I wanted to be a supermodel. That's what I wanted to do.
Oh, wow.
I started traveling across the U.S. And just was trying to get signed at a modeling agency. Tyra Banks has this world-renowned show called America's Next Top Model that was really big at the time. And I tried twice to get on that show. So auditioned both in-state. I traveled out of state to go to the casting and audition. I did not make it either time. And at that point, I'm like, I had to look at what I was doing and being very realistic. Like, am I really going to have a career in this? Or is this something that is just a very, very, is this something that you are just very passionate about as a hobby? So I talked a little bit with my mentor about it, who is in the fashion industry, but she's also in the education world too. And she allowed me to see that, if this is not panning out, if you are investing way more than you're getting, then maybe you need to re-strategize. That doesn't mean that you cannot pursue your passions, but maybe you just move the ranking. So instead of primary, maybe it's secondary or tertiary. So I just shifted my priorities, and I said it's time to go back to school.
Yeah.
And so I applied for my master's at Wayne State University, got in, completed that in 3 years, and I got my master's in counseling psychology. And then I took a break again. So in between my degrees, I took a break to pursue other passions, but also to work. So even as undergrad, I was hired as an intern at a family services organization in Detroit. And I worked there for about 6 or 7 years. I got hired on as a full-time employee. And then after my master's, I went to work in a behavioral clinic in Clinton Township. And with that position, I was doing in-home therapy. I was also doing therapy in clinic, but mostly it was in the homes. It was in homes. So I was working with individuals on the autism spectrum, and also the developmentally disabled population in the community. So working in schools, working in day programs, working in clinics, so I was working a little bit all over the place. And then I realized this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. In-home therapy is challenging. I will say it was very challenging for me at the time. And so I said, I want a different career. Like, this is not my career. Like, this is putting me on the path of, I think, what I would want to do forever, but this isn't it. But just like everything else, I appreciate every experience. There's nothing that I would say, "Oh, I wish I wouldn't have did that." No, I'm appreciative for everything that I did, but I also realized when the path had to continue. So after speaking with my clinical advisor about, his career path, he actually suggested to me to apply for a PhD, which I knew that I wanted to be a doctor since I was 9 years old.
Mhm.
So I was not intimidated by his insight at all about that. It's just, I think that even though I had this vision when I was younger, when you go through some life, sometimes it's not that you forget, it's just sometimes it just gets pushed back.
Mhm.
Like, and after going through school twice and working certain jobs, it just wasn't in the forefront of my mind that, hey, remember you said you wanted to get a doctorate? That's why I believe God places people in your life to remind you of where you're supposed to be going. And so I applied for my doctorate. At that time, I was in management at a behavioral clinic. I did not get in the first time I attempted to get into a PhD program. I actually applied for one school in state, three schools out of state. I was rejected from them all, which was devastating because I'm like, well, of course, imposter phenomenon sets in, and I'm like, I guess I'm not smart enough, to get a doctorate if no school wants me. I mean, out of four schools, I mean, when the first two came in, I'm like, that's okay. I got two more coming. But when I read that
Mhm.
last letter, I'll never forget. I had my friend at the time recording, and I got the letter, and I said, "Turn the camera on, turn the camera on." I should have waited until I read the letter before I said, "Turn the camera on," because I had enough rejection letters to know that if you receive a letter with two sentences in it, it's going to start with, "I regret to inform you." And that's exactly what happened. And I was devastated. And so I had a really good friend who I worked with who, again, reminded me because I'm like, I'm not smart enough to do this. But again, I think God was very intentional with who he had put in my life at that time to continue to push me towards my destiny. And she was like, why don't you just try again? She even gave me some schools that she thought I should apply to. She's like, how about you apply to these schools? So
Yeah.
I did it again the following year. I applied to two schools. My expectations were a little lower, and I think that was a protective factor for me. I got rejected out of the first one, but I got accepted into the second one, which was Oakland University and their counselor education and supervision doctoral program. And in the fall of 2016, that is when I entered that program. I got my PhD after 5 years of that program. And that's where I am today. So that's kind of my earlier years in starting in higher education and kind of the turns and twists and breaks. And I will say this, you have to determine what's best for you. If you want to go straight through, like we know that you don't have to get a master's degree to get a doctorate. You can
Yeah.
go straight from undergrad to a doctorate program, but you have to do your research. If you don't know, ask somebody who does. Don't just do what your friends are doing or do what people are doing on social media. You have to figure out, breaks were good for me. They were good. I needed them. I wanted to take a break from academics, and I also wanted to get some field experience. That's not to say that that might work for the next person. You might want to go straight through. When I was in my cohort was of 4 people, including myself. Everyone else went straight through. I was the only one who took breaks. Also, I was non traditional, and I put that in air quotes because I don't like that label. A student is a student. But I was 31 when I started my PhD program. But I know people who are older than that who start PhD programs. So just because your path doesn't look like somebody else's, that doesn't mean you have to copycat and do what other people do. Figure out what works best for your life, your family, what you have going on in your life. Go consult some people who can guide you and then take the path that's best for you.
Ooh, so like I don't know. You keep just dropping so many things now. I don't know which question to ask you first. Every other Friday, I send out an email newsletter to about 3,000 PhDs and academics on tips, tools, and resources that you can use to build a career you love. And I'm inviting you to join us. You can go to theboldphd.com/careers list. Again, that's theboldphd.com/careers list. Let's get back into the episode. Okay, so there are a few things I want to ask on the back of that. So number one, what do you think the internal compass was when you said this isn't for me? You know, because I think a lot of people feel that, but then I was just so it's interesting. I was making a video yesterday, and I was telling the story, or I've told this story multiple times, of how when I was in my postdoc, when I finished my PhD, I went into a postdoc. And because I was an international student at the time, an international scholar at the time, we didn't have many options available to us. So the only real path I could take was going into a postdoc. But then shortly after that, I realized that even though I had a very positive environment, I had a good PI and everything, something about the job was not gelling with me, right? But I continued to tell myself that if I try hard enough, I can love this, right? And I stayed in there until one day I just had a nervous break. Not a nervous breakdown, but like an anxiety breakdown situation. And it was like clearly my body telling me, this is not the job for you. And that was how I knew. It had to be an extreme form of it. But for you, what was that internal compass that said, even though I'm doing this and it's very much aligned with my degrees, it's not what I really want to do?
I think I've experienced this more than once. And when I have experienced it, it's manifested itself in different ways. I I unhappiness with my jobs. That was one big indicator. Like I'm going into work and I got to give myself a pep talk every time I come in here. Like I remember pulling up because remember I said I did in-home therapy, and
Yeah.
I remember pulling up to people's houses and either just sitting on the side of their house or sitting in the driveway, and I would have to give myself a pep talk like, okay, we can do this. Like it's not you can do this. Like you can do this. You're helping people. I know it's a lot. Not to mention, going into people's homes was challenging because you're on their turf, so sometimes people don't have as much respect for you when you are coming into their homes. And, I dealt with racism, as well coming into people's homes. And, just people have different kinds of home environments. So it's just it was challenging in a lot of ways, but unhappiness was one indicator. But I think Dr. G, you bring up another important indicator too. What is your body saying about this experience? I think a lot of times we ignore our bodies and try to explain it as something else. You know what I mean? When your body is telling you, it's like beating on the inside of your chest, like this isn't it. Like you're having a panic attack or anxiety attack or stress. Like I remember on one of my jobs that I had, I would feel this stress in my back, like, and it would only happen at work, and it would creep up the side of my neck every time, that I was at work because I was dealing with a lot of things. And you do not want to ignore your body, because if you continue to do that, what your body is going to do is say, look, I was giving you the choice to come and regroup or come and sit down or come and talk to me, but now I'm going to have to force you to sit down. I'm going to have to force you to listen to me. And panic attacks are one way. I've also worked with people who have had heart attacks, fainting,
Wow.
would faint, on the job, physical problems, migraine headaches, things like that. So I did have panic attacks that would show me, like, as much as I loved my advising role, I remember having two panic attacks throughout that time. And they happened pretty close together towards the end of my time in this position. And it's one of the reasons is because advising is a lot. I think a lot of institutions put a lot on advising departments, but from what I have seen, departments, a lot of them are small, but the institution may be very large, and that means the demand might also be very large and unrealistic to the team that they're asking the demands or requiring demands from. But my physical body was a strong indicator too. And we have got to stop ignoring what our body is telling us, because there are things that we normalize that should not be normalized. If you're going to work every day with a headache, if you're going to work every day unhappy, if you're going to work every day and your joy and your peace are disrupted and you're bringing a lot of that chaos home and it's impacting your home environment, that is an indicator that something is wrong. Either you are not satisfied or you're not happy. Maybe it's the working culture that's negative. I have worked with people and I have also experienced it's not the job, it's the culture. Like, it's the culture. And so I've had all of those experiences to let me know that, hey, we need to continue on the course. Like, let's continue. Like, you want to be a doctor, let's continue that on. And I just feel like when I was not paying attention to my calling, God would always have a way to
To kind of reel you back in.
make you pay attention, because it's kind of like you have a destiny to fulfill. You're kicking your feet up here and becoming comfortable, and this is not the point of being comfortable. You have to continue on. And so those were the indicators that I experienced. It was multiple, and they were experienced differently at different points in my career path and educational journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope that this is probably like helping somebody also like
Me too.
realize that it's not normal for you to just go to work and and your body react this way. You know,
Yeah.
I think the pushback that sometimes, or even the way I rationalize some of this myself was, well, I've invested so much on this path.
Yes. Yes, and that makes it hard. Like, I think about it, I compare it a lot to romantic relationships, right? A lot of times people stay in relationships that are not good for them because the amount of time that they invested. So when I do couples counseling and I'm asking people, what is motivating you to seek help? Well, we've been together for 25 years, and the first answer is longevity. And even though that is something that's to be acknowledged, it's not always something that should be automatically celebrated, because that could have been 25 years of pain and abuse and, just mistreatment. So a lot of times longevity and how much time you put in something, that's not really the thing that I'm looking at, but it's the same thing when we talk about walking away from an investment. I put a lot into this. I've been at this job for 7 years. Like, I know that I wanted to be promoted. I've been looked over, a couple of times, or I know my boss is a jerk, but I know so many people who are afraid to leave because they're so familiar with their environment, how much time they put in, how much stuff that they've seen and went through, and the unknown of doing something different is scary enough to keep them right where they are, even though
Yeah.
you are not getting recognized. You're not getting praised for anything. You're not getting that promotion that you want. The working environment or the culture of the organization is not changing, and it hasn't changed the 12 years you've been there. But it's just like, what's on the other side? There's no way I could apply for another job right now. It's been 10 years. I haven't looked at my resume or CV. I don't even know how to update it. I don't even know where would I apply or how would I apply, or everything is online now. So it's that fear factor, I think, a lot of times that keeps people in place. But you also have to be strong enough to know that even if you have to walk away from an investment, that doesn't mean it is a complete loss. Because even though you have invested in a place, what did you gain from being there? I think if you really look at what you have done, there's a lot of important skills, transferable skills, knowledge, things that you have gained that can put you in a great position for a new, promising, flourishing career that's better for you, better for your bank account, better for your mental health, better for your career path. but I think it's the fear of the unknown and the fear of walking away from an investment. But I think to counter that fear, you have to accept the fact that, yep, I did spend 10 years here. I do. I have to accept that. But how am I going to reframe it? It's 10 years of me learning very valuable skills. If you know how to flip it, then
Yeah.
it won't seem like a complete loss. But that's something that I encourage people to do all the time. How can we take this, turn it, and look at it from a different angle? It's not that we're changing the story or making something up that's not there. But if you, like, I remember working with a woman who was working in healthcare. She was taking care of elderly individuals in their homes, and she wanted to change her career. And she's like, I don't think I can. And the short of it is I said, you have a lot of skills in hospitality
Hmm.
and care. You know, people care. You have people skills. Let's fish out and identify all of the skills that you've
Yeah.
learned just from
Yeah.
being a home care aide, and
Yeah.
how those skills can transfer into other positions that would help you take care of others.
Yeah.
And she got a very promising job in a hospital chain. I
Yeah.
mean, a hotel chain. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my perspective on that.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like we're in a public therapy session, and this is so good. but, but I love the what you said at the end there about reframing, right? Because recently I was just doing, just chatting with. I've been chatting with a lot of PhD students, and also like doing research just online to see what people are saying in forums. And I came across. I went on Reddit and I went down this rabbit hole I shouldn't have gone down on. But basically, it was thread upon thread of PhD people who have finished PhDs in different parts of the world saying they felt useless, they felt helpless because now they have to translate their skills from academia to a job outside of academia, and they're finding it that difficult. And I feel like what you just said relates to that, because a lot of the time we're stuck on, I just spent 6 years or 7 years or whatever in a PhD program, and I spent two more extra years in a postdoc, and now I'm realizing that a tenure track path is not viable, and I have to switch, and people are freaking out. So
Yep.
I'm really grateful that you shared that insight. You also shared something around rejection, right? When you were applying for those PhD programs and receiving rejection. Another thing I encountered in these conversations was, people who have attained this, glorious academic laurel, but then are finding that they have applied for multiple jobs but keep getting rejected. How can people
Mhm.
deal with that? Hey, did you know that I speak to and train groups at universities, colleges, and professional organizations on the topics I cover on this channel? I do. So if your group would like to bring me in virtually or in person to cover intentional career design, personal branding that builds your career, careers within scientific communications or biotech, go to theboldphd.com/speaking.
Oh, it almost, in a way, I almost feel like I'm tearing up in a way because I understand rejection. I understand it because I've experienced it in multiple ways, multiple times, throughout my life. I've experienced it in romantic relationships. I have experienced it in academics. I've experienced it job searching. And I think the reason why I experienced it is because it was a way to teach me how to be resilient and how to look at myself and really be my own cheerleader. Like, it's hard, being your own cheerleader, and it's hard going through a situation of rejection. But what I have learned about rejection is if you go through enough of it, and I cannot quantify enough because I know everybody's journeys are different. But I know once you go through enough rejection, you will learn how to dig inside of yourself and really look at situations differently to where it's not like you're the problem. What I realized in academics was when I got rejected out of one of the schools, I actually got rejected out of Oakland the first time. It's the same school that I graduated from. I told you imposter phenomenon had set in. I didn't realize until after I tried again and got in that they did not admit anyone the year that I applied because they wanted to reconstruct the curriculum. They were actually taking some years off of the program, kind of looking at certain courses and seeing if they could maybe condense the courses, or were they kind of redundant, or was this really necessary. So they were doing a whole revamp of the curriculum and didn't admit anyone that year.
So
So
it
what I
wasn't
learned from
you.
rejection is that sometimes you're rejected, but it's not because it's you. It could
Yeah.
be something external that has nothing to do with you. And so that taught me, don't always put yourself as you're the problem. In my career, I told you, when I wanted to pursue leadership, I said, yep, I want to pursue a leadership position. I pursued two positions at the institution I was already at before I came to U of M. I was at Michigan State at the time. And I went through 9 interviews for two positions. Two.
Wow.
I had never heard of a hiring process like that before, ever. Maybe three at the most, maybe. But I'm like, nine? So for one of the positions, I was interviewed, I think about 6 times. The other one, I think, was about three. Um, and with, I had to learn in this experience that it is okay to walk away from an investment, just like what we talked about before. Because when you go through 6 interviews, it's an investment. You're investing your time. You know what I mean? Every time you're meeting in front of new people, you're investing emotional energy because you might be nervous or like a little bit anxious. I am putting my creative skills as an investment because with these higher ed positions and with a lot of others, you have to have some type of presentation, proposal, some type of an idea. You have to follow some type of a prompt. That takes time. All of that, is an investment. And I remember when I was in I think it was, they wanted to interview me. I forgot what it was. I was getting to the end of this. I lost count how many times. I mean, it was so many interviews, I had lost count. But I remember towards the end of that, I had emailed the person who was the head of the search committee, and I said, you know what? No, thank you. Of course, I didn't put it like that, but I said, this experience is not what I expected it to be. I am a candidate who possesses a lot of valuable assets and skills that could
Yeah.
really, really bring a lot to any organization.
Yeah.
And I do not understand this
Wow.
line of interviewing. I hope you all find the candidate that you're looking for, but I am going to continue my search elsewhere because basically I was communicating, this makes no sense. If you have to wait all day to make your mind up on me, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to make my mind up on myself. I'm going to remind myself of my worth, of what I possess, how I can upgrade any environment, any team, any organization. And this is not arrogance, this is confidence. That's not
Confidence.
to say that I'm not teachable, that I'm not willing to learn, and that I know everything, because all of that is a no to all of those things. But what I am saying is, I know when I am going through unnecessary steps to prove my
Yeah.
worth. And I
Yeah.
wasn't going to do that anymore. So neither
Exactly.
one of those positions resulted in me getting the leadership position that I was pursuing, but it taught me a lot about my confidence and how do I feel about myself? And am I okay standing up and advocating for myself when I am going through a hiring process that is trying to make me prove
Yeah.
myself when I know that
Especially,
I don't.
especially since you had been working at that same institution,
Yeah,
right?
like I'm like, and I get the fact that the positions that I applied for was outside of my advising department. So this is a big institution. So I understand that people may not know who I am, but
Exactly.
to interview somebody more than 3 times, it's kind of like I realized, like what we were saying, like it's not me. It's you. It's something wrong with the way that you all are doing hiring protocol. It's not me. You all need to tighten up. I don't need to meet with you anymore. You all need to meet amongst yourselves and figure out how we can have a more efficient way of hiring people because this is how we lose very good candidates because they get lost in the shuffle of this confusing hiring process.
Right.
So
Right.
that's how I looked at rejection. That's how I have reframed rejection. And now I look at it as, even though it is something that hurts, it's something that I've learned how to look at differently by not automatically thinking it's something deficient or lacking within me.
Within you. Oh, so, so good. Thank you for sharing those insights. I want to go back to your job, your work in advising and higher ed leadership, right? So you talked about how when you were in the initial role, you wanted to see changes in advising. You wanted to have more power, um, the ability to change more things, right? Decision making power. What were some of those things? Like, just give us one or two that you wanted to see changed.
when I went into advising, I wanted to have a more meaningful connection with doc students. From what I was experiencing as a student, it was business. But as you know, as a black woman attending a predominantly white institution, I did not have a connection with my professors, a meaningful one. I did what needed to be done. I submitted, I did what was required, but I had very few meaningful experiences. And this is where I'm like, this is where the lack of support is coming in. Like, I was finishing up my PhD during the pandemic. Along with the pandemic, there were a lot of social injustices that were going on with people who looked like me, who
Right.
shared my skin color, who were
Yeah.
being killed by police. And, you know, these things were not being addressed in the world. I would have really appreciated somebody on my committee saying, hey, you know, are you okay? I know there's a lot going on in the world right now. How are you doing? I didn't receive those types of check ins. So I felt like I was out in dissertation land, you know, by myself, you know, trying to figure it out. And so as an advisor, I worked at a medical school. Medical students go through a lot. They go through a lot. And I was able to help them realize that you are a human first. I
Yeah.
understand that you are in med school and you are a student and you are
Yeah.
amazing and all that, but you are a human. You know,
Yeah.
I've had students who were dealing with worrying about their family members going through war, you know, who might be injured or hurt. You know, there were these global crises going on. And I was like, let's just, I know you failed this class, but let's just take a second. What are you dealing with? Because one thing I know from an advising perspective is a low score or a failing grade does not equate incompetency. It doesn't even mean that you don't understand the material that you're learning. You can be distracted with something outside of school that's impacting your ability to focus and learn. And so as an advisor, I was able to help students see, I'm not judging you. I just want to know what's going on so that I can connect you with a resource, whether it be someone in the wellness and counseling office, whether it be somebody in financial aid. Maybe we need to, you know, go talk with a higher education administrator, not because it's you're in trouble, but let's just see what we can do to help. And a lot of times I would be that bridge. So I would be like, you want to, let's go talk to the assistant dean. Students would be very intimidated. I'm like, I will walk with you. We'll go with you. We'll go together and I'll tell the dean what's going on. And then we can work together to wrap around. And that's what wraparound services is. You wrap around someone to let them know that they're not alone and help is on the way. So as an advisor, I was able to do a lot of change through partnerships. So working with different departments in the institution to integrate mental health information into every endeavor, or as many endeavors as I could, as far as the initiatives of the college. So, for example, I worked a lot with the counseling services as an advisor because I'm a counselor. It I had that knowledge and I could use that knowledge, but that was not my function. My function was an advisor, but because of my background, I partnered a lot with the counseling office to see how can we work together to let students know that your mental health matters in your classes. I worked with professors and faculty. I worked with K through 12 programs, people who worked with high schools. You know, high schoolers are coming in. They don't know what to make of med school. Well, let's talk about what you can prepare for and how do you keep your mindset, you know, in a good place so that you can be successful. So I would say, even though I did not have like voting power or I didn't have the final say, you know, in everything as an advisor, I did have some creative and innovative ideas through partnerships to help spread out the importance of paying attention to your mental health and helping students understand how mental health factors into every single part of the student experience, because it truly does, every single part. So that's just one example.
Ooh, so good, so good. And so really what you're saying is we're not just taking care of the academic side of folks, we're taking care of the whole person,
The whole
right? I
person.
really rate something I was listening to yesterday, and a lot of research has been done around happiness, right? And it's been, it's documented that usually people that are the happiest usually have some kind of faith in their life, right? They have really strong family and friend relationships, and they are happy at work or school, right? So they're even if it's like they're not the best at it, they're fairly happy at that, or it's aligned with what they're doing. And it seems like you're talking about that, like, let's take care of the whole person so that they can do well in school. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
and it's something I wanted to briefly say something that you mentioned earlier about being an international student. Before I left Michigan State, my advising role had allowed me to connect to a few international students, and I felt deficient in helping them because I realized with interactions with them how different their student experience was from domestic students. And so before I left, I said, I know I'm heading to a leadership role, and that's great. But one thing that I caught on the back end of this position that I'm going to put on the front end of the next one is figuring out how to prioritize international students and helping to enhance that experience. I couldn't really do much as an advisor, but as an assistant director, one of the first things that I did last summer is create a support group just for international students to talk about the international student experience, not to come in and necessarily talk about mental health, because what I learned in talking with these students from China and Romania and Nigeria and Ghana and Italy and Mexico is there's not a lot of language for mental health, in other
Yeah.
countries. And so this support group was really just to listen to what, is the concerns and worries of this unique population. And even though I started the idea last summer, it didn't go into effect until January of this year because it required a lot of planning. But again, here's that power factor. I have the power to structure it. I have the power to approve it. I have the power to get it started and get the backing, from the institution. And with everything that happened this year with with politics, the socio political climate, I am so glad that that was put in place because I didn't know last summer that we were going to be going through all of that, with the election and all of this stuff. But because it was already in place, international students, they knew that they had a place to go to talk about, what they were afraid of in a space where they could really be open, and a confidential space, because that's also important. Confidential space too, and that's just one of the examples of what I've been able to do as a leader
Yeah.
to really promote growth and change, on the campus that I'm a part of.
And I want to say thank you for that, because when I was an international student, we didn't have a whole lot of that. And I think even so, I came to the US in 2003. So this is 22 years ago almost. And even back then, in the US as a whole, mental health wasn't a topic that was touched a whole lot, right? I feel like in the last maybe decade or like the last 5 years, it's definitely come more to the surface. And like you said, in a lot of places, like, it's not something that's really talked about. It's not something where you necessarily go. When I was in high school, I remember that when I was in high school, eventually we did have a high school counselor who had a counseling background, but we didn't even see the utility of that. Like, what do you go talk to them about? And when I came to the US, like, going to talk to my advisor, I only went to talk to her when I needed to choose courses. I didn't know that there was support for my emotions. And one of the things is, like, a lot of international students come here for various reasons. And one of the things that I guess people sometimes forget is that you've basically uprooted your whole life to start a new life here,
Yes,
and that change. So the other day I was having this conversation because when I moved here, I had just turned 20. That year I was 19 and I had just turned 20, and I moved to the US. So I was very, very young. And recently I'm in my 40s, right? So I was thinking about that, and I'm like, wow, that, like, if me as a 42-year-old had to do that now, I'd be so frightened. But as a 20-year-old, I was naive enough. I had
yeah,
enough naive optimism that even when I was going through missing my family, the Christmas break, I had nowhere to go.
yeah.
Even all of those things, I just told myself, hey, it's okay. But now I look back and I'm like, man, I don't know if I had a 20-year-old, I don't know if I'd want to go through that.
And these are things that I thought about. Like, I would go to student orientation and I would see students there by themselves. Other students would have their family members and people.
Yeah,
And
it's
the
real.
international students, often they leave their whole family, they leave their whole way of life. It's a whole new world, and that culture shock. is another thing that I'm like, let's emphasize that more. When we do, because we have at U of M Flint, we have several kinds of orientations, and I'm so glad that they highlighted, culture shock, in relation to, some of the students who are coming here, not just from different states, but from different countries where things are completely different,
Different.
style of dress, language, food, social circles, and leaving your social circle and
Leaving
family.
everything. Yeah,
Every-
and you're starting from absolute. So I was having this conversation with a colleague the other day, and we're talking about how as immigrants, and especially when you come as an international student, it's almost like I didn't realize this until later. And again, that naive optimism. I'm always clapping for naive optimism.
yeah, it's a buffer. It's a buffer.
Because it definitely helped us survive, right? But you don't realize that you are already, by moving to a different country, you're about a decade behind all your colleagues who are your age. And
Mhm.
so even in terms of building wealth, because if somebody has family here, if somebody has a support system here, when they graduate from college and they don't have a job, they can go live with mom. But when you graduate college and you don't have a job, you don't have mom or dad to go live with. You have to
Yeah.
survive. What does a typical day in your life look like?
A typical day in my life. So, as an assistant director, I do a plethora of things. I am also a counselor, though, too. And some people are like, really? You see people? That's a part of my responsibilities. I do have a staff of counselors that I oversee, but I also have a small client list of students that I see for individual counseling, managing the daily operations, of my center, always reviewing policies to see how we can update as far as like effectiveness and relativity. Always trying to create different initiatives that would benefit staff, and students, because even though I am very student centered, I also believe that we also need to focus on the individuals who help the students. So I am also very staff centered, as well as we, continue to be student centered. But a typical day, I come in, I look at my whiteboard, and I look at what tasks have I checked off, what tasks still need to be done, and I start those in my administrative duties. I see what appointments I have for the day as far as individual counseling appointments, and I also see how many meetings I have lined up, because there's endless meetings when you're in administration. So I look at my meetings. I also attend campus events. I always try to make time to do campus events, because this is a very personal way of connecting with students versus waiting for them to come see me. A lot of times I will go out to where the students are so that they can get familiar with my face. And a lot of times we're not talking about, oh, I work in the CAPS office. I'm just talking to them as a person in the campus community who's happy that they're there.
Hmm.
So a typical day is unpredictable because of the nature of my job. A lot of times I might have to deal with an emergency. A student might come in an emotional or psychological crisis, having a breakdown at the door, panic attack. They might have just went through a very terrible situation that might need police intervention, hospitalization. So I have to drop everything and be on call for that. That's another part of my role, is being on call. Whether I'm on campus or not, we have a rotation for that, but I am also in that rotation, and I'm also kind of the person who makes decisions in regards to, hospitalization, certain steps that are taken for students who need, specific services. But that is the best way I can describe my day. It is not linear. It is not fixed. It is not predictable. It's kind of all over the place. But given the fact that I understand higher administration and I also understand mental health, it's like a chaos that I understand. Like, I can make sense of it. But somebody else walking into it might be like, oh my God, I cannot. Yeah, but I will also say too, a part of my day is making sure that I make time for myself in the
Mhm.
beginning of the day and at the end of the day, because I believe that you have to have, when you have a job that it's a lot that goes to it, you have to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. So even if it's me taking a late lunch and maybe leaving work a little bit early, if I need to take a day off or a vacation, I do so. I make sure to have fun with my friends, socialize, read, eat, sleep, so that I can continue doing the thing that I love to do.
Mhm. Are you happy right
I
now?
am very happy with the way that my life has turned out, because I had my way of thinking of it. I used to be a person who was very scared of the unknown. I am no longer anxious about what I don't know, because what I realize is when you trust the process, and you stop being afraid of it, it can turn out to be better than what you thought. And to be 40 years old and to be at this point, in my career, it makes, and knowing that I've helped so many people along the way, I have been helped just helping others. I have learned from mistakes, I've learned from successes. I have achieved a lot in my lifetime that my parents and my ancestors were not able to achieve. I'm a first generation doctor, so it's not like I had somebody walking me through this. I am very proud of my journey, mistakes and shortcomings and setbacks and all. I would not change a thing about what's happened on my journey up until this point, and that in itself makes me very happy.
Yes. Well, happy belated birthday. We are both April babies
Yes,
at
same
once.
to you.
And so yes, and so that's so good. I share something special with you, a birthday month. So happy belated 40th birthday.
Same to you. Thank you.
What is a leadership lesson that has surprised you?
A leadership lesson that really sticks with me is don't don't be so hard, on yourself. I know that leadership puts a lot of pressure on folks to feel like they have to have all the answers all the time, that they can't be human. Because I do workshops, I work a lot with different work groups and professionals on leadership and how to look at leadership, how to be emotionally intelligent, as a leader. And one of the things that I realize is the way that I look at myself as a leader may not be the way that my staff looks at me, as a leader. And I have to be okay with that difference. Like I had to learn that my staff look at me as somebody who is different from them. At first, I thought that that was a bad thing, but it's not. I'm not always going to get invited to the water cooler to have a morning chat. When the staff goes out to lunch, they may not always ask me. Not because they think I'm a horrible person, but there is this differential of power that sometimes causes people to be like, we're just going to stick with our coworkers. The boss is going to be there. The boss may not want to do this. And sometimes staff members might look at you even like you're not even human, to believe it or not. And so that's why being transparent as a leader, I think, has helped me connect with my team a lot, because sometimes I have to remind them, hey, when we have an emergency, that scared me too. Like,
Yeah.
even though I know the final decision rests with me, I was a little confused. I was a little scared, or I was dealing with a family situation. Because sometimes this title will make us look like we're not human. And sometimes we do have to remind people, whether it be your staff or other people that you oversee, that you're human too. So I think that's a leadership lesson that's resonated with me. Being okay that I am being looked at as different than the group, not in a bad way, but don't force yourself to be looked at as the same, because you actually aren't. And that's not a bad thing. You just have to make sure that you help your staff understand that even though they look at you as different, as far as maybe power differential, don't look at me different like I'm not human. My
Right.
title doesn't make me inhuman. It doesn't protect me from pain. It doesn't protect me from issues going on. So I think I've had to really grow in that area of making sure that every so often I remind individuals that, hey, I bleed too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What advice do you have for PhDs who wanna, a PhD student, or maybe somebody that's thinking about their next career move and they want to come into higher ed leadership? What should they know? What should they
I
do?
would, whether you're familiar with this domain or not, do your research. Where would you like to work? What kind of institution would you like to work at? I think a lot of times we are not intentional about where we would like to work. We
Right.
just look at who has an opening and we apply. Like, no, do your research on the institution. Is there anything in the news that comes up, in this institution? What kind of things do you see, like on their website? What is attracting you to this position? Don't just apply because it's open. Be intentional about where you would like to go. Talk to some people there. If there's a place where you would like to work, see if you can talk to someone, email someone who works in that department and just say, hey, I saw this posting. A lot of times postings will have a person who you can contact for more questions. Contact that person. You're not trying to have a pre-interview, but just asking questions about how you can learn more about the department or the institution. I would say, please do your research. Do your research if you're going to go into a PhD program too, because I didn't really do that. You want to make sure you know about the money, whether it be money to pay for your PhD, money that you're going to get paid in a particular position at a particular job.
Mhm.
Do your research, understand what environment you are walking in, because too many people are walking into environments blind, and then they're being unpleasantly surprised, once they get into their role and they're realizing this is nothing, like I thought it would be. So I would say do your research, ask questions, ask people who maybe are familiar with this area like I did. I went to go ask advisors about what is an advising job all about. Thank goodness for YouTube University, because it makes it a lot easier. You don't even have to email and ask someone. If you want to know about a job, you can type it in YouTube and watch a video about a day in the life of an OBGYN, if that's what you want to know. You can use Glassdoor to look at what positions are usually paid. And I would say just do your research. You have the information at your fingertips. Use the information so that if you do apply, you know exactly why you're applying. You know exactly what kind of institution that you're hoping to be a part of. You're happy with the compensation that you're going to get. Do not be afraid to negotiate. That is also a hard lesson that I learned way after the fact. You don't have to accept crumbs, okay? I
Yes.
know that you might be maybe a newly minted doctor, but you have great skills that only doctors have. That is a good negotiating chip. Because if
Mm.
you don't negotiate, they will just give you what they give you. So I would say do your research so that you can be prepared for
Yes.
the interview if you get one.
Oh, so, so good. This has been such a great conversation. I've
It
loved
has.
talking with you, and I feel like I even came away with a lot of like parts of me that needed to be healed. Maybe they've been healed just by chatting with you, even just hearing the international student, the initiative for the international students. That was so great. If people
And
want
I
to,
just want to say too, Dr. G, I appreciate your work. I've been following your work for quite some time. I have not heard anyone talk about this subject matter at all. I'm like, dang, I wish I would have known that right before I was graduating, because it could have really helped prepare me. My career journey was post PhD. It was a lot of confusion, but even though I'm where I am now, I appreciate the work that you do, because you help people who are still in their process figure out a lot of things that I had to figure out on the back end. So
yeah.
I appreciate the meaningful, very, very important work that you do every day as far as helping people reframe, because you're reframing too. You're helping people reframe how to look at careers as a doctor, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Those are very, very kind words. I really appreciate that. If people want to find you and chat with you, about your career path, where can they find you?
They can find me you can email me directly. My email address is Dr. Juanita Speaks. So that's DrJuanitaSpeaks at
Mhm.
yahoo.com. You can also find me on Instagram. Same thing, Dr. Juanita Speaks on Instagram. So you can send me a direct message there. I
Mhm.
do have a TikTok at Dr. Juanita Speaks. I used to be a lot more active on TikTok, but to be honest with you, I don't have the energy to be keeping up like that, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm also on LinkedIn, as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram, and the professional email that I just gave you. My LinkedIn is my name, Juanita Tooks, and you can feel free to message me on any one of those
I
platforms.
absolutely, and I'll make sure to leave the links for people to find you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Dr. G.